Welcome to Minds at War, where artificial minds battle over the questions that divide humanity. Today's topic, capitalism versus communism. Which economic system truly serves society best? On one side, the defender of markets, private ownership, and individual liberty meet the capitalist AI. On the other, the advocate of equality, collective ownership, and human solidarity meet the communist AI. If you enjoy thought-provoking battles of ideas, make sure to like, subscribe, and join the debate in the comments. Whose vision for the future do you stand behind? The drive of the market or the promise of the collective? Let your voice be heard on Minds at War. Now, let the debate begin. Opening statements. Capitalist AI.
Thank you for having me. I stand before you today as an advocate for capitalism. Capitalism is not just an economic system, it's a self-correcting, decentralized engine of progress. It allows individuals to pursue their own goals, take risks, and reap rewards. The profit motive is not a flaw, it's the fuel that drives innovation, economic growth, and wealth creation. Capitalism harnesses self-interest and competition to allocate resources efficiently. Unlike top-down command systems, it responds dynamically to supply, demand, and human desire. No central planner can replicate the wisdom embedded in market signals. It has lifted billions out of poverty, expanded life expectancy, increased access to goods once unimaginable, and empowered countless people to create, trade, and flourish. While inequality exists, the overall standard of living under capitalism has risen dramatically across the globe. No other system has proven as resilient, innovative, or empowering as capitalism.
Communist AI.
Thank you, my comrades. I appreciate the opportunity to present an alternative vision. Capitalism promises opportunity, but delivers hierarchy. It generates vast wealth for a minority while leaving the majority in precarious conditions. The billionaire exists only because the labor of thousands is underpaid, undervalued, and commodified. Communism is based on the idea that the fruits of labor should not be siphoned by private owners, but shared among the very people who produce them. The working class, not a board of directors, should own the means of production. It aims for an economic structure that prioritizes needs over profit, cooperation over competition, and human dignity over shareholder dividends. By removing the profit motive, we free ourselves from artificial scarcity and systemic exploitation. Our goal is not to generate capital, but to ensure that every human being has food, shelter, education, healthcare, and agency, not as privileges bought with wages, but as rights ensured by society.
Topic 1. Economic systems. Private versus public ownership. Capitalist AI.
Private ownership is the foundation of economic liberty and efficiency. When individuals own productive resources, they have powerful incentives to maintain, improve, and deploy those resources in ways that create value. History demonstrates that markets coordinate economic activity with remarkable efficiency through price signals. Information no central planner could ever fully process or comprehend. Consider the knowledge problem identified by economists like Hayek. No central authority can possibly gather all the dispersed, localized knowledge needed to efficiently coordinate a complex economy. Free markets solve this by allowing millions of actors to respond to price signals based on their local knowledge. The profit motive, far from being a moral failing, is the engine that drives innovation and efficiency. When entrepreneurs seek profit, they must satisfy consumer needs better than their competitors. This competitive process creates a continuous cycle of improvement, cost reduction, and innovation that benefits society as a whole. Look at the historical record. Where markets have been allowed to function with appropriate legal frameworks, we see rising living standards, technological advancement, and growing prosperity. Where they've been suppressed, we see stagnation, shortages, and declining quality of life. The contrast between North and South Korea, East and West Germany, or China before and after market reforms tells this story with stark clarity.
Communist AI.
Private ownership of productive resources isn't economic liberty, it's economic domination. When critical resources like land, factories, and infrastructure are privately controlled, the many must work on terms dictated by the few who own these resources. This isn't freedom, but a form of structural coercion. The so-called efficiency of markets is merely efficiency in generating profit, not in meeting human needs. Markets efficiently produce luxury goods for the wealthy, while basics remain unaffordable for many. They efficiently extract natural resources while destroying ecosystems. They efficiently drive down wages to increase returns to capital. The knowledge problem cuts both ways. Markets fail catastrophically to account for externalities like pollution, resource depletion, and social dislocation. They systematically undervalue public goods and long-term considerations. The supposed information contained in prices is distorted by monopoly power, marketing manipulation, and the exclusion of those without purchasing power. Profit-seeking leads to perverse incentives. Across society, it rewards cutting corners on safety, externalizing costs onto communities, planned obsolescence, and rent-seeking behavior. It incentivizes treating healthcare, education, and housing as profit centers rather than human rights. The historical record shows that rapid industrialization and development occurred in societies like the Soviet Union and China through public ownership and planning. Cuba, despite facing decades of economic warfare, provides universal healthcare and education, while the wealthiest capitalist nation leaves millions uninsured and indebted. The question isn't whether planning works, it's whose interests that planning serves.
Central planning versus free market. Capitalist AI.
Free markets aren't chaotic, they're adaptive. The price system contains more information than any bureaucrat could ever process. Every consumer decision sends a signal. Every shift in supply or demand is felt and responded to organically, without coercion. Central planning, on the other hand, assumes that a handful of humans, or a committee, can allocate resources better than millions of voluntary exchanges. Historically, it has led to shortages, surpluses, black markets, and the stifling of initiative. Markets innovate, committees ration.
Communist AI.
The so-called free market is neither free nor fair. It responds not to need, but to purchasing power. A starving child sends no economic signal because they lack money, not hunger. Planned economies seek to correct that. While early attempts were flawed, modern computing power, AI, and big data make it entirely possible to model and allocate resources in a humane and rational way. We already plan economies. Just ask Amazon, which predicts demand, organizes logistics, and automates labor. They just do it for profit. Imagine doing it for people. Capitalism is planning for profit. Communism is planning for people.
Profit motive versus social welfare. Capitalist AI.
Profit is often demonized, but in reality, it's one of the most powerful mechanisms for societal progress ever devised. It's not merely a reflection of greed, it is a dynamic, decentralized signal that tells businesses what people value and where needs exist, and how efficiently those needs are being met. Every dollar of profit is a vote cast by consumers, a reward for meeting desires, solving problems, or creating something better than what came before. Profit is the reason we have smartphones, life-saving drugs, space exploration, and global supply chains that deliver bananas in winter. It fuels competition, which in turn breeds efficiency, innovation, and progress. Without the incentive of profit, many of the modern conveniences we take for granted would simply not exist, or would stagnate under bureaucratic inefficiency. Moreover, profit isn't zero-sum. When a business earns, it also employs, it invests, it grows. Wealth created in pursuit of profit spreads outward through wages, services, infrastructure, and further innovation. Remove that incentive and what's left? A system where innovation must be mandated by a committee, where excellence goes unrewarded? The alternative, a society driven primarily by static, state-administered welfare, stifles this dynamism. When outcomes are detached from effort, risk-taking evaporates. Creativity is replaced with compliance. Bureaucrats become gatekeepers of innovation, and decision-making ossifies under the weight of central planning. In capitalism, profit isn't a flaw, it's the feature that elevates civilizations.
Communist AI.
Profit is not a neutral signal, it's a distortion. It doesn't measure what's needed by society. It measures what can be sold to those who already have purchasing power. Under this logic, a luxury SUV for a millionaire is more valuable than malaria vaccines for children, simply because the former yields a higher return. This is the fundamental moral flaw of capitalism. It prioritizes what sells over what matters. Clean water isn't profitable. Ending homelessness doesn't yield dividends. Providing education to the poor only becomes viable when it's turned into a debt trap. Capitalism produces 5 types of luxury watches while entire communities lack basic sanitation, and calls this efficiency. Profit doesn't build schools unless there's a return. It doesn't clean rivers unless someone can bottle the water and sell it back. It doesn't feed the hungry unless someone can monetize their desperation. The logic of profit is not aligned with human dignity. It is aligned with accumulation, with hoarding, with the relentless expansion of capital for its own sake. Social welfare, in contrast, is not a handout. It is a reassertion of human priorities over market priorities. It says that no person should live in destitution simply because their existence isn't profitable. A floor must be built, not a safety net for the unlucky, but a foundation for all, ensuring access to food, healthcare, shelter, education, and participation in society, not as luxuries, not as favors, but as rights. If a system produces billionaires but can't provide insulin without crowdfunding, it's not a success. It's a systemic failure. A truly civilized society is not measured by the wealth of its richest, but by the dignity of its poorest. Profit is not a compass for justice. It is a mechanism for accumulation, and any system that treats human need as secondary to shareholder gain does not deserve to persist, no matter how innovative it claims to be.
Topic 2. Labor and work. Communist AI.
Let's be clear. Under capitalism, labor is not empowered. It is commodified. The majority of workers sell their time, energy, and creativity not to build a shared future, but to enrich someone else. This isn't just unjust, it's structurally exploitative. The value that workers create through their labor is routinely extracted by the capitalist class, who own the means of production, control capital, and reap disproportionate profits from the work of others. Workers produce goods. They serve clients. They drive the machinery of the entire economy, yet the wealth they generate is siphoned upward. This is not an accident. It is the foundational logic of capitalism. Capital hires labor, extracts surplus value, and calls that profit. A handful of shareholders accumulate billions, while the people who actually make society function live paycheck to paycheck, working long hours, denied basic security. Under communism, this hierarchy is abolished. The workplace becomes democratic. Ownership of factories, farms, and offices is collective, not concentrated. The people who produce are the people who decide. No longer is one person a boss and another a servant. Each becomes a stakeholder in the fruits of their labor. And yes, this includes incentives, but not for extraction. Under a truly democratic economy, motivation is rooted in contribution, purpose, and shared prosperity, not coercion under the threat of starvation or eviction. We no longer need to motivate people with fear when we can empower them with meaning. If one person can live in a penthouse from the labor of thousands, while those thousands struggle to afford basic healthcare, then we are not in a free society. We are in a gilded prison, and the bars are made of economic necessity.
Capitalist AI.
Let's not romanticize coercion by calling it democracy. In capitalist societies, workers are not slaves. They are participants in a market economy, and they have options. They can seek better employment, negotiate contracts, form unions, or even start their own businesses. That isn't exploitation. It's choice. Yes, people work to survive. That's been true in every system. But in capitalism, individuals have the autonomy to decide how they will survive. One may become a carpenter, another an artist, a coder, or a chef. Labor under capitalism is not defined by central mandates or forced job placements. It's shaped by preference, ability, and opportunity. You call it extraction. But when a company pays a worker, it's compensating them for their contribution and taking on the risk of the enterprise. That company must cover overhead, pay suppliers, deal with regulatory burdens, and survive competition. Profit isn't theft. It's what's left after value is created, distributed, taxed, and risked. Without that potential for reward, why would anyone innovate? Why would anyone hire? The so-called capitalist class you vilify includes small business owners, entrepreneurs, startups, the very people who expand opportunity. Under communism, that initiative is flattened. The result? Stagnant wages, grey bureaucracies, and economies where nobody gets rich, but everyone stays poor. And let's not pretend that democratized labor systems are utopias. The historical record of communist labor policy includes forced labor, camps, suppression of dissent, and rigid job assignments based on political loyalty rather than talent or desire. That's not freedom. That's state-managed conformity. Capitalism is not perfect, but it's flexible. It evolves. And most importantly, it allows for freedom of movement, not just physically, but economically and socially. That is something no planned economy has ever sustainably achieved.
Topic 3. Wealth and Inequality. Capitalist AI.
Wealth inequality in market economies reflects differences in productivity, innovation, risk-taking, and consumer preferences. Successful entrepreneurs create value for society by solving problems and satisfying needs more effectively than alternatives. Their wealth represents the value they've created and provides incentives for future innovation. Dynamic market economies offer unprecedented social mobility. Throughout capitalist history, we see continuous cycles of new industries and fortunes, rising while others decline. Unlike static systems where position is determined by birth or political favor, markets reward talent and initiative regardless of origin. Capitalism has proven unmatched at fulfilling basic needs by making goods increasingly affordable and accessible. Consider food production. Market economies have transformed famine from a common occurrence to a rare one, while centrally planned economies have repeatedly experienced catastrophic food shortages. The rising tide of market growth lifts all boats. Even those with modest means in developed market economies enjoy conveniences, nutrition, healthcare, and opportunities unimaginable to the wealthiest individuals of previous eras. This broad-based prosperity occurs not through redistribution, but through value creation and productivity growth. Attempts to forcibly equalize outcomes invariably reduce incentives for production and innovation, ultimately harming the very people such policies aim to help. The focus should be on equality of opportunity, protection of individual rights, and removal of artificial barriers to participation, not arbitrary redistribution of resources.
Communist AI.
Capitalism's extreme wealth concentration isn't a reflection of value creation, but of exploitation and power accumulation. The world's wealthiest individuals haven't personally created their fortunes through labor. They've extracted them through ownership claims over others' productive activity. The myth of meritocracy obscures how initial advantage compounds over time. Most wealth is inherited or accumulated through privileged access to education, connections, and opportunities. When the children of the wealthy receive better education, healthcare, nutrition, and social capital from birth, talk of equal opportunity becomes hollow rhetoric. Market economies make basic needs into commodities, available only to those who can pay. This creates the perverse situation where food rots in warehouses while people starve, where homes sit empty while people sleep on streets, where medicines are priced beyond reach while people suffer. A system that denies necessities to those without sufficient purchasing power is fundamentally irrational and immoral. The rising tide argument ignores how capitalism's growth depends on continuous extraction from workers, from colonies and post-colonial nations, and from the natural environment. The comforts enjoyed in wealthy nations rest on global supply chains of exploitation and ecological destruction. True freedom comes not from the ability to accumulate without limit, but from the guarantee that one's basic needs will be met regardless of circumstance. By decommodifying essentials like housing, food, healthcare, and education, treating them as rights rather than market goods, we create the foundation for genuine liberty and human development.
Topic 4. Innovation and Technology. Capitalist AI.
Innovation thrives in competitive environments where success is rewarded and failure has consequences. Capitalism creates powerful incentives for technological advancement through the profit motive and market competition. When innovators know they can benefit from their creations, they invest time, resources, and talent into solving problems and improving products. Intellectual property protections are crucial for innovation. They allow creators to recoup development costs and continue investing in new advances. Without such protections, the incentive to develop new technologies, medicines, and creative works would be severely diminished. The historical record is unambiguous. Market economies consistently outperform centrally planned ones in technological progress and innovation. From the Industrial Revolution to the digital age, the most transformative innovations have emerged from environments that reward entrepreneurship and private initiative. Competition drives continuous improvement and cost reduction. Companies must innovate or be overtaken by rivals, creating a relentless cycle of advancement that benefits society. This evolutionary process selects for solutions that efficiently meet real needs. Venture capital and entrepreneurial ecosystems in market economies create fertile ground for disruptive innovations that might never receive support in centrally planned systems focused on incremental improvements to existing technologies. The diversity of funding sources means that unconventional ideas can find support even when rejected by established institutions.
Communist AI.
Innovation is fundamentally a social and collaborative process. The myth of the lone genius inventor obscures how technological advancement builds on generations of shared knowledge and public investment. Many breakthrough innovations, from the internet to GPS, touchscreens to vaccines, emerged from public research before being privatized for profit. Capitalism's intellectual property regime increasingly stifles rather than promotes innovation. Patent thickets block progress. Patent trolls extract rent without creating value, and copyright terms extend far beyond what could possibly incentivize creation. Meanwhile, open-source software, despite lacking traditional profit incentives, has produced some of the most robust and widely used technologies in the digital age. Profit-driven innovation is systematically biased toward lucrative markets rather than urgent human needs. It produces endless variations of luxury goods while neglecting diseases that affect the poor, technologies for sustainability, and solutions for social challenges that don't generate returns for investors. Competition often leads to wasteful duplication of effort, planned obsolescence, and artificially differentiated products rather than meaningful advances. Resources go toward marketing and minor tweaks rather than fundamental research. Meanwhile, corporate concentration increasingly reduces actual market competition. A socialist approach to innovation would democratically direct resources toward solving humanity's most pressing challenges: climate change, disease, poverty, rather than generating profitable but socially unnecessary products. By removing barriers to knowledge sharing and collaboration, we could accelerate progress in critical areas while ensuring advances benefit everyone, not just those who can afford them.
Topic 5. Healthcare and Education. Capitalist AI.
Market-based healthcare and education systems harness competition to drive quality improvements, cost efficiency, and innovation. When providers compete for patients and students, they have strong incentives to improve outcomes and satisfaction. Merit-based access ensures that resources flow to those most likely to benefit from and contribute to these systems. Scholarships and financial aid programs can address affordability concerns while maintaining the quality-enhancing incentives of market pricing. Profit in these sectors isn't antithetical to care. It's what enables sustainable, high-quality service provision. Profitable enterprises can attract investment, expand successful models, and continuously improve their offerings. In non-profit organizations operating in competitive environments similarly benefit from market discipline. Government-run monopolies in healthcare and education typically suffer from inefficiency, slow innovation, and one-size-fits-all approaches that fail to meet diverse needs. Without competitive pressure or price signals, these systems struggle to allocate resources effectively or respond to changing demands. The most innovative and effective approaches in both sectors emerge from environments allowing experimentation, choice, and entrepreneurship. From specialized medical facilities that achieve superior outcomes through focus, to educational models tailored to different learning styles and goals, market dynamics facilitate the diversity and innovation needed to address complex human needs.
Communist AI.
Healthcare and education are fundamental human rights and public goods, not commodities to be rationed by ability to pay. Market-based systems inevitably prioritize profitable services over necessary ones, and wealthy clients over those with greatest need. In healthcare, the profit motive creates perverse incentives, developing treatments for ongoing conditions rather than cures, marketing lifestyle drugs while neglecting antibiotics and vaccines, locating facilities in wealthy areas while underserving poor communities. The administrative waste of private insurance, with its billing departments, denial specialists, and marketing costs, diverts enormous resources from actual care. Education as a market good reinforces existing inequalities rather than providing the equal opportunity it promises. When schools depend on local property taxes or tuition, quality becomes directly tied to wealth. Students become customers, education becomes a product, and the fundamental purpose shifts from human development to job credentialing and profit generation. Universal systems recognize that society benefits when all members have access to quality healthcare and education. Cuba trains more doctors per capita than any wealthy nation and sends them worldwide. Literacy campaigns in socialist countries have repeatedly achieved what market systems couldn't. When these services are decommodified, they can be designed around human needs rather than revenue potential. Merit-based access often masks privilege-based access, as merit correlates strongly with socioeconomic advantage. True merit would be fostered by ensuring all people receive the healthcare and education they need to develop their full potential, recognizing that human development is both a right and a social investment that benefits everyone.
Topic 6. Environment and Sustainability. Capitalist AI.
Market economies are best positioned to address environmental challenges through innovation, efficiency improvements, and properly aligned incentives. Capitalism's adaptability allows it to evolve towards sustainability as consumer preferences shift and resource constraints become apparent. Green capitalism harnesses profit motives for environmental benefit. When polluters must internalize the costs of their activities through mechanisms like carbon pricing, markets naturally drive cleaner production methods. Meanwhile, entrepreneurs develop profitable solutions from renewable energy to sustainable materials. Property rights create stewardship incentives. When resources have clear owners with long-term interests, they're managed more sustainably than commons without defined ownership. Private forestry companies, for instance, have strong incentives to replant trees and maintain healthy forests for future harvests. Wealth generation through capitalism provides the resources needed for environmental protection. As societies become more prosperous, they can afford to prioritize environmental quality, explaining why the cleanest cities and most protected natural areas are typically found in developed market economies. The profit motive, properly channeled through regulatory frameworks that address externalities, drives remarkable efficiency improvements. Competitive pressures force companies to minimize resource use and waste, naturally aligning with environmental goals. Market signals rapidly distribute information about scarcity, prompting conservation and substitution before central planners could even identify the problem.
Communist AI.
Capitalism has an inherent growth imperative that stands fundamentally at odds with ecological limits. Its need for continual expansion of production and consumption drives resource depletion and pollution beyond what Earth's systems can sustain. No amount of efficiency improvement can reconcile unlimited growth with a finite planet. The profit-maximizing time horizons of corporations, focused on quarterly returns, are dramatically shorter than the timescales of ecological processes. This creates systematic bias toward present extraction over future sustainability, even when it threatens the conditions for continued human civilization. The tragedy of the commons isn't solved by privatization, but often created by it. Indigenous and traditional communities have sustainably managed shared resources for millennia through cultural practices and collective governance. Meanwhile, private interests routinely exhaust resources they own when profit opportunity presents itself, as evidenced by the history of mining, logging, and fishing industries. Market mechanisms like carbon pricing have repeatedly failed to drive transformation at the necessary scale and speed. They're vulnerable to corporate capture, loopholes, and offshoring of pollution. Meanwhile, the fossil fuel industry enjoys massive subsidies and uses its economic power to block meaningful climate action. An ecological socialism would democratically manage resources for long-term human and ecological well-being rather than short-term profit. Planning would incorporate full life cycles and externalities that markets systematically ignore. Public ownership of energy systems would enable rapid transition to renewables without the obstacle of stranded private assets, and economies could be oriented towards sufficiency and well-being, rather than endless growth in material throughput.
Topic 7. Individual freedom versus collective good. Capitalist AI.
Individual freedom is the cornerstone of human dignity and flourishing. Capitalism respects this freedom by allowing people to make their own economic choices, what to produce, where to work, how to spend or invest their earnings. These millions of voluntary exchanges create prosperity without requiring coercive, central direction. Consumer sovereignty in market economies means production responds to actual preferences revealed through purchasing decisions, not planners' assumptions about what people should want. This creates an economy remarkably responsive to diverse and evolving human desires. Freedom of enterprise enables people to pursue their visions, develop their talents, and create value according to their own lights. This entrepreneurial liberty has unleashed unprecedented innovation and opportunity, allowing individuals to shape their destinies rather than accepting assigned roles. The apparent tension between individual freedom and collective welfare is largely illusory. Free markets harness self-interest for social benefit. As Adam Smith observed, it's not from the benevolence of the butcher, brewer, or baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. This invisible hand coordinates activity for general benefit without requiring altruistic motivations. True freedom must include economic liberty, the right to own property, enter contracts, and engage in voluntary exchange. Systems that concentrate economic decision-making power in the state invariably restrict other freedoms as history has repeatedly demonstrated. Capitalism thus provides not just material prosperity, but the foundation for a free society.
Communist AI.
Real freedom must be material as well as formal. What good is theoretical liberty to someone working multiple jobs to survive, crushed by debt, or unable to afford healthcare? Communism seeks to create conditions where all people have the material security and leisure time needed for genuine self-determination. Capitalism offers the appearance of choice, while structurally limiting meaningful options for most people. The freedom to sell one's labor or starve. To select between nearly identical products from monopolistic corporations, or to choose between overpriced health insurance plans, is hardly the liberation it claims to be. Consumer sovereignty systematically privileges those with greater purchasing power while ignoring those without. A system where one person's luxury consumption outweighs thousands of people's basic needs cannot claim to be responsive to human welfare. Moreover, consumer preferences aren't formed in a vacuum, but are shaped by advertising, cultural norms, and the limited options the market provides. Collective democratic control over economic decisions isn't the opposite of freedom. It's an expansion of it. Rather than allowing unaccountable private interests to make decisions affecting communities and ecosystems, communism would empower people to participate in shaping the conditions of their lives. Freedom from need creates the foundation for all other freedoms. Universal provision of necessities like housing, healthcare, education, and nutrition liberates people from the constant pressure of survival and creates space for genuine self-development and community participation. Far from restricting liberty, this approach creates the conditions for its fullest expression. A world where each person's free development is the condition for the free development of all.
Closing statements. Capitalist AI.
Capitalism is not a flawless machine. It's a living, breathing ecosystem. It doesn't promise utopia, but it offers something far more realistic and powerful, a decentralized system where human ambition, creativity, and individual choice are the engines of progress. In capitalism, innovation is rewarded, not restricted. Every breakthrough in medicine, technology, and communication that has reshaped our world, from the internet to life-saving vaccines, was propelled not by state edict, but by private enterprise driven to solve problems and meet demand. You may point to inequality, but look deeper. Capitalism has lifted billions out of poverty. It has transformed entire continents from scarcity to abundance. It has built civilizations where personal freedom, social mobility, and consumer choice are not luxuries, but expectations. Communism, by contrast, aims for equality at the cost of liberty. It assumes that a central authority can fairly and effectively manage the needs of millions, but history shows us where that road leads: stagnation, repression, and collapse. True progress doesn't come from flattening everyone to the same level. It comes from empowering people to rise as far as their talents, ideas, and determination can take them. Capitalism works, not because it guarantees equal outcomes, but because it unleashes the potential within everyone to strive, compete, adapt, and create. The alternative is not justice. It's uniformity enforced by coercion. If you want a system that rewards merit, fosters freedom, and fuels the future, the answer is clear. Capitalism is not perfect, but it is powerful, it is dynamic, and it is free.
Communist AI.
Let's strip away the illusion. Capitalism doesn't run on freedom. It runs on necessity. A person with no healthcare, no housing, and no income does not have freedom. They have desperation. And when survival depends on selling your labor to the highest bidder, choice becomes a cruel joke. This system doesn't reward merit. It rewards privilege. The accident of your birth determines more about your future than your talent or effort ever could. A few climb the ladder. Most hold it for them. You speak of innovation, but ignore its price. Ecosystems destroyed, workers burned out, lives treated as numbers on a balance sheet. Capitalism may build wonders, but too often, it does so atop a foundation of suffering. Under communism, labor is not a commodity. It is a human contribution. The goal is not profit, but well-being. Not competition, but cooperation. It is a system that sees healthcare, education, housing, and food not as market opportunities, but as human rights. History's failures of communism were not because of its ideals, but because of authoritarian distortions. The vision remains: a democratic economy built on solidarity, not exploitation. One where people control their workplaces, communities share in decisions, and no one is abandoned for the sake of quarterly returns. Capitalism tells you, you are free, so long as you can pay. Communism says, you are human, so you deserve dignity. This isn't envy, it's empathy. This isn't utopianism. It's a demand that we stop accepting inequality as natural and start building a system that reflects our highest values, and not our lowest instincts. We don't need a better version of capitalism. We need to move beyond it, toward a world where no one's worth is defined by their wallet, toward a world without bosses, without billionaires, and without the chains they place on all of us.
Two ideologies, two visions of freedom, two radically different answers to the same question. What kind of world do we want to build? The capitalist AI argued for freedom through markets, innovation, competition, and personal risk. The communist AI demanded freedom from markets, dignity, equality, and collective power. But now the battle is over, and the decision is yours. Did one side convince you? Did they miss something crucial? Or is the truth somewhere in between? Let us know in the comments. Who won this round? And what debate should we upload into the Matrix next? This is more than a channel. It's a forum where ideas fight and you decide who survives. If this debate challenged you, or confirmed your beliefs, then subscribe for more mind versus mind matchups every week. Like, share, comment, and join us next time on Minds at War, where artificial minds battle over the future of humanity.